You disgusting, bottom-feeding trash are only good enough to lick the dirt off my shoes. The heavy crystal glass shatters violently against the bulkhead. A freezing wave of dark red wine slashes across my face. It stings my eyes and stains my crisp white uniform collar like fresh blood. Before I can even blink to clear my blurred vision, a heavy fist swings through the air. It connects with my jaw with a sickening thud. A blinding flash of pain explodes in the tight, claustrophobic space of the first-class cabin. Gasps of pure horror erupt from the surrounding passengers. Stop right there. Look at this pathetic display of unchecked wealth and sheer arrogance. If you truly believe that no amount of dirty money gives anyone the right to strip away another human being's dignity, I need you to do something right now. Comment "I won't bow" down below to prove that justice still exists in this world. And make sure you hit that subscribe button, because you will not want to miss the brutal reality check this guy is about to receive. Let me take you back exactly 3 hours before this nightmare began. The fluorescent lights of the international terminal were buzzing with a dull, endless hum. I was standing behind the priority check-in counter. I was keeping a steady, positive mindset despite the grueling hours. That is simply who I am. I am someone who believes in walking the talk, working tirelessly, and never letting temporary setbacks break my spirit. I took this extra weekend shift because I am a single father, trying to build a solid, unshakable foundation for my little girl. I want to teach her that honest work, whether it is quietly tending to our backyard vegetable garden, raising fish in the pond, or serving people at 30,000 feet, carries immense honor. My past days in the Marine Corps taught me unbreakable discipline, but fatherhood taught me a deep, unyielding patience. However, that patience was about to be tested in the absolute worst way imaginable. The passenger line was moving smoothly until a sharp, obnoxious voice cut right through the polite murmurs of the airport. "Do you even know who I am, you incompetent little peasants?" That voice belonged to Richard Sterling. He marched aggressively up to the counter. He threw a heavy, custom leather designer bag onto the scale so hard it cracked the plastic housing. He was wearing a bespoke 3-piece suit that probably cost more than my entire annual salary. His face was flushed red with the kind of toxic entitlement that only comes from a lifetime of never being told no. He slammed a sleek, solid metal platinum card onto the desk. He sneered down at my young female colleague with absolute disdain. "I demand an upgrade to the private luxury suite immediately. And I am not paying a single dime for it." When she politely and softly informed him that the flight was fully booked, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust. "You listen to me, you little nobody. I own half the commercial real estate in this entire city. I could buy this miserable second-rate airline and have you scrubbing public toilets by tomorrow morning." He leaned over the counter, invading her personal space. He was spitting his words with a toxic, venomous hatred. "Now give me my first-class boarding pass before I have security throw you out on the street where you belong." I immediately stepped in, placing myself between him and my terrified coworker. I used my calmest, most authoritative voice to diffuse the escalating situation. I handed him his ticket, looking him dead in the eye. I maintained the unwavering, icy composure drilled into me during my grueling combat deployments. He snatched the thick paper ticket from my hand. He eyed my name tag, my features, and my Asian heritage with a look of absolute, sickening repulsion. "You people are all exactly the same. Always taking good jobs from real, hardworking Americans. Just carry my heavy bags and keep your mouth shut, boy." He shoved forcefully past me, deliberately knocking his shoulder into my chest. He completely ignored the metal detector beeping wildly as he walked through. He waved off the airport security agents who were simply too intimidated by his elite status to dare stop him. I took a deep, slow breath, letting the vile insult slide off me like water over stone. I flatly refused to be dragged down into the mud by someone else's miserable, toxic energy. My ultimate goal is financial freedom and a peaceful, harmonious life. I am absolutely not going to let a spoiled billionaire derail my intense focus. I gathered my flight logs and headed down the long jet bridge, mentally preparing for the arduous journey ahead. But the heavy tension was already building up like a massive storm front rolling over a dark ocean. As soon as we boarded the massive aircraft, the tight, confined space of the cabin instantly became Sterling's personal playground for cruelty. He dropped heavily into his oversized leather seat. He immediately kicked his expensive shoes off. He rested his bare, foul-smelling feet right onto the armrest of the elderly woman sitting in the row directly in front of him. When she timidly and politely asked him to move them, he laughed loudly, right in her fragile face. "If you wanted personal space, sweetheart, you should have flown on a private jet. Now, sit back, shut up, and enjoy the sweet smell of success." He aggressively snapped his fingers at the young junior flight attendants. He demanded vintage champagne before the heavy cabin doors were even securely closed. He grabbed the fragile wrist of a young stewardess when she handed him a steaming hot towel. He held her arm tight enough to leave a painful, purple bruise. "Make sure my glass never goes empty, honey. Or I will personally make sure you never ever fly for any airline again." He was a vicious predator locked inside a pressurized metal tube. He was fueled by expensive alcohol and unbridled, toxic arrogance. I watched his every move from the cramped forward galley. My jaw was clenched so tight my teeth genuinely ached. I could feel the old, dormant instincts flaring up hot in my chest. It was the primal instinct to protect the weak, to neutralize an active threat, and to bring swift order to chaos. But I am a trained professional. I had promised myself I would walk the talk. I vowed to handle every single challenge with a polite smile, outwork everyone, and stay completely out of trouble. I poured myself a small paper cup of cold water, desperately trying to center my racing thoughts. I thought about the quiet, misty mornings by the fish pond back at my house. I visualized the simple, pure joy of watching life thrive in a peaceful environment. I tried my hardest to channel that calming, serene peace, but the unfortunate truth is that some men just want to watch the world burn. And they absolutely do not care whose necks they have to step on to light the match. The massive plane pushed back slowly from the gate. The giant twin engines roared to life, violently vibrating through the thin floorboards beneath my feet. We were hurtling down the long runway, rapidly ascending into a pitch-black, stormy night sky. And the real nightmare was just getting started. About 2 hours into the grueling flight, the atmosphere shifted drastically. The captain's voice crackled over the PA system, cutting through the low hum of the massive jet engines. We were heading straight into a massive, unpredictable patch of rough air over the Midwest. The familiar, sharp ding of the fasten seatbelt chime echoed loudly across the dimly lit cabin. I immediately began my mandatory walkthrough to ensure every single person was safely buckled in. The safety of these people is my absolute top priority. Most passengers were already asleep, wrapped in their blankets, or quietly complying with the safety instructions. Then I reached row 2 of the luxury first-class section. Richard Sterling was not in his seat. He was standing right in the middle of the narrow aisle, completely blocking the path. He was swaying slightly, his balance clearly compromised by the altitude and the alcohol. In his right hand, he was clutching a half-empty bottle of our most expensive premium vintage red wine. He had apparently bypassed the crew entirely and just helped himself to the locked galley cart. "Sir, I need you to return to your seat and fasten your seatbelt immediately." I kept my tone perfectly even, deeply respectful, and highly professional. I approached him slowly, keeping my hands visible and non-threatening. He turned his head slowly, his eyes glassy but filled with a sharp, vicious malice that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Are you actually trying to give me an order, you little glorified servant? I pay your miserable salary. I practically own this flying piece of tin. You do not ever tell me what to do." Suddenly, the massive commercial airliner dropped abruptly, losing hundreds of feet of altitude in a split second. A violent, jarring jolt shook the entire cabin, causing several overhead storage bins to rattle dangerously. A woman 2 rows back let out a sharp, terrified scream as her drink spilled all over her lap. The situation was rapidly deteriorating from a minor annoyance into a severe safety hazard. I stepped closer, maintaining a non-threatening posture but keeping my core engaged, falling back into my old military habits. I was ready to react to any sudden movements. "Sir, For your own safety and the safety of everyone around you, please sit down right now. He scoffed loudly, a horrible, ugly sound that echoed in the tight space. He lifted the heavy glass bottle and took a sloppy, careless swig directly from the neck. Dark red wine dribbled down his chin, completely staining the collar of his immaculate, custom-tailored silk shirt. You genuinely think you have some sort of authority here? You think putting on that cheap little polyester uniform makes you a real man? Where did they even dig you up to work this route? You should be on your knees thanking me that I even let you breathe the same recycled air as me. The blatant racism and pure, unadulterated hatred rolling off his body were absolutely suffocating. It was a thick, toxic cloud of entitlement that sought to crush anyone who dared to stand in its way. But I remembered my core philosophy and the deep promises I made to myself. I am a man who refuses to fear failure, a man who will never let highly toxic people dictate my emotions or my actions. I have faced down intense, terrifying insurgent fire in the sweltering deserts of the Middle East. I have carried wounded brothers on my back through situations this spoiled coward could never even comprehend in his worst nightmares. I am certainly not going to let a drunk, arrogant, out-of-control billionaire break my inner peace. I silently reminded myself of my beautiful daughter waiting for me at home. I thought of my ambitious goals, the financial freedom I am relentlessly working toward, and the quiet, peaceful life I am building with my own two hands. I held my ground in that aisle, completely immovable, rooted like an ancient tree facing a storm. If you are watching this right now, and you have ever had to bite your tongue while someone in a position of power completely disrespected you, you know exactly how heavy that invisible burden really is. You know the sheer, agonizing willpower it takes to protect others while actively swallowing your own pride. You know what it feels like to be treated like you are less than human just because of your job title or your bank account. I need you to drop a comment saying, "I won't bow down right now." Let us unite and show the world that enduring abuse in silence is not a sign of weakness. It is a masterclass in discipline, strength, and ultimate control. Make sure you are subscribed, because the justice coming his way is something you have to see to believe. Back in the claustrophobic cabin, the severe turbulence was getting significantly worse by the second. The heavy aircraft was violently bucking side to side, fighting against massive crosswinds. Sterling lost his footing and stumbled heavily forward. He was about to fall directly onto a young, terrified mother who was desperately clutching her sleeping toddler in row 3. My instincts kicked in faster than conscious thought. I immediately reached out and grabbed him firmly by the elbow to stabilize his heavy frame. I pulled him back, shifting his weight away from the vulnerable passengers. That simple, protective action was the spark that ignited the massive powder keg. He yanked his arm back violently, looking at me as if I had just burned his skin with a hot iron brand. "Do not ever put your filthy, disgusting hands on me." He was fully screaming now, flecks of spit flying from his mouth and landing on my clean white shirt. "I am calling the CEO of this garbage airline the absolute second we land on the tarmac. I golf with him at the country club every single month. I am going to have you fired before you even step off this plane. I am going to use every single connection I have to make sure you are permanently blacklisted from ever holding a decent job in this entire country again. You and your pathetic family will be begging for scraps on the streets where your kind belongs." I did not flinch. I did not blink. I did not give him the satisfaction of seeing even a single ounce of fear or intimidation. I looked at him with an absolute, unwavering, terrifying calm that only comes from staring death in the face and surviving. "Sir, you are completely free to make all the phone calls you want once we are safely on the ground. But right now, in the air, you are an active danger to this flight and everyone on it. Sit down in your seat." The utter lack of fear in my eyes completely broke whatever fragile, inflated ego he had left holding him together. In that split second, he realized that his massive bank accounts, his platinum cards, and his empty threats meant absolutely nothing to me. He had absolutely no power over my mind. And that simple realization drove him completely insane. His face turned a deep, dangerous shade of purple. "You disgusting, bottom-feeding trash are only good enough to lick the dirt off my shoes." He tightly gripped the heavy crystal wine glass he had snatched from his tray table. With a vicious flick of his wrist, he hurled the dark, sticky red wine straight into my face. The cold liquid temporarily blinded me, burning my eyes and dripping down my neck. And then, before I could even wipe my vision clear, he channeled all of his drunken, furious weight into his arm. He threw a wild, heavy, full-force punch directly at my face. The sickening, heavy thud of his fist connecting with my jaw echoed loudly through the completely silent, terrified cabin. The nightmare had reached its absolute breaking point. The heavy fist swung toward my face, fueled by blind, drunken rage. To the terrified passengers watching, it probably looked like a blurry, unavoidable strike. But to me, time completely slowed down. Years of intense, grueling, hand-to-hand combat training in the Marine Corps instantly overrode my polite customer service persona. I did not panic. I did not even blink. As his knuckles closed the distance to my jaw, I simply shifted my weight slightly to the left. His fist sailed harmlessly past my ear, hitting nothing but empty air. The sheer momentum of his missed punch threw his heavy, uncoordinated body completely off balance. Before he could even comprehend what had just happened, muscle memory took over completely. I stepped inside his guard, firmly grabbed his expensive silk sleeve, and secured a flawless textbook wrist lock. I did not strike him back. I did not need to. With one swift, calculated motion, I twisted his arm behind his back and guided him directly down to the rough carpeted floor of the cabin. He hit the ground with a heavy, humiliating thud. His face was completely smashed against the aisle, right next to the very shoes he had told me to lick. He screamed loudly. It was not a scream of agonizing physical pain, but a high-pitched shriek of pure, shattered ego and utter disbelief. "Let me go," he shrieked, thrashing his legs wildly like a spoiled toddler throwing a massive temper tantrum. "I am going to destroy your miserable life. I will buy this entire airline and burn it to the absolute ground." I applied just enough steady pressure to his pinned shoulder to keep him completely immobilized, maintaining a cold, unyielding silence. "I am a man of my word. I said I would not let a toxic bully break my peace, and I meant it. I am focused entirely on building a beautiful, financially free life for my little girl, and I will absolutely not throw my future away by throwing a punch." The senior flight attendant rushed over, her face pale with shock. I looked up at her, my voice perfectly calm and steady over the roar of the engines and the screaming billionaire beneath me. "Call the flight deck. Tell the captain we have a code red. Active physical assault on a crew member." Within seconds, the heavy aircraft banked sharply. We were no longer heading to our scheduled destination. The captain immediately declared a federal emergency and initiated a rapid descent toward the nearest major airport. For the next 45 agonizing minutes, I kept Richard Sterling pinned to the floor. His threats slowly turned into pathetic, desperate bargaining, and finally, into quiet, humiliating sobs. The reality of his actions was finally crashing down on his inflated reality. The plane hit the tarmac hard and taxied directly to a remote, isolated section of the runway. We did not even make it to a passenger gate. The heavy cabin door was violently thrown open from the outside. A team of heavily armed Federal Bureau of Investigation agents and federal air marshals swarmed into the first-class cabin. They did not care about his platinum card. They did not care about his massive real estate empire. They hauled him up off the floor by his ruined, wine-stained designer suit. They slammed cold, heavy steel handcuffs onto his wrists right in front of the entire plane. The entire cabin, which had been holding its collective breath, suddenly erupted into massive, thunderous applause. Sterling was weeping uncontrollably now. The powerful, arrogant titan of industry was crying like a scared, helpless child as they dragged him down the steps and threw him into the back of a federal vehicle. Here is the beautiful, undeniable reality of the consequences he faced. Assaulting a flight crew member is a severe federal crime that carries absolutely no possibility of a simple slap on the wrist. He was immediately hit with a maximum civil penalty of $250,000 by the Federal Aviation Administration. He was charged with a federal felony that carries a potential sentence of up to 20 years in a federal penitentiary. And the absolute best part? He was permanently placed on the federal no-fly list. This arrogant billionaire, who thought he owned the sky, will never, ever be allowed to board a commercial aircraft in this country again for the rest of his miserable life. Furthermore, multiple passengers had secretly recorded the entire sickening incident on their phones. By the time I landed back home, the footage had gone completely viral. His massive corporate investors saw the disgusting, racist tirade and instantly pulled hundreds of millions of dollars in funding. His board of directors forced him to resign in absolute disgrace to save the company's plummeting stock price. He lost everything that made him feel superior. As for me, I went home. I hugged my beautiful daughter tighter than ever before. I walked out to my peaceful backyard, fed my fish, and quietly tended to my vegetable garden. I kept my job, I kept my absolute dignity, and my journey toward financial freedom remains completely unstoppable. But I have a very serious question for you right now. If you had been sitting in that first-class cabin, watching a wealthy, arrogant tyrant physically assault a hardworking father who was just trying to do his job, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent, looking down at your shoes because you were too intimidated by his money and power? Or would you have stood up to defend the innocent? In the face of pure, unchecked evil, your silence is nothing but silent agreement. Do not be a bystander in your own life. Comment, "I won't bow down right now," to prove that you stand with the working class and that you will never let toxic wealth crush human dignity. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, because the world is full of arrogant elites who desperately need to be taught a harsh lesson, and I will be right here to tell every single story.